So, with no further ado, as long as everyone's good technically, I'd like to introduce Tori. She's our Director of Programs and Strategy. She works out of the global office in New York, and she will be having a conversation with Samuel today, our Country Director for THP Ghana. Take it away, Tori.
Thank you. Thank you so much for everyone's time and attention. I do see some familiar faces, but for anyone I have not had the pleasure of meeting, it is a joy to be with you as we are all in self-isolation. So thank you for joining this, especially on a personal note. I love seeing everybody. Which brings me to sort of one of the themes that rose to the surface when we were talking about this webinar and what we thought might be interesting and fruitful to share with our wider Hunger Project family, which is really the notion of gathering and coming together. As many of you know, interconnectedness is one of the foundational principles of the Hunger Project. And even though it's always been a principle, in these very strange times where we really see these universals emerging right now in the form of this virus, which is very universal, that only a collective and universal interconnected response is an appropriate one. Anything that lacks that characteristic will clearly fall short because of how deeply interconnected we all are. There is a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I think that the partnership that we can see amongst all of you today, but really every day that we work together on solving the issues of hunger and poverty globally, speaks to how far we all want to go together. So really for us, keeping that principle of interconnectedness and unity in our minds as we hear from Samuel today, I think will help position the work the Hunger Project is doing. So to introduce Samuel, which is my pleasure, you can see his bio on our website, but I'll give you a few highlights. Samuel's entire career has been dedicated to development in Ghana, specifically poverty reduction. He has held positions in the Ghanaian government to oversee projects alongside the United Nations Development Program, GTZ, which is the government development agency, in addition to a variety of roles with international NGOs. Prior to joining THP in 2012, Samuel was a specialist on the Northern Region Poverty Reduction Program, which was funded by the International Fund for Agricultural Development and supervised by the World Bank. He became country director in 2013, and since he joined THP, he's really been a cherished member of our team and a mentor to me. So has a special place in my heart. Again, it's a privilege to be interviewing him today. So we have a couple of questions that it won't be a pop quiz. Samuel and I had the chance to discuss them, but a chance for us to pick his brain and hear more from the expert on the call about the work the Hunger Project is doing. So Samuel, diving into those, we know that the Hunger Project Ghana has launched the most epicenters among all the countries in Africa where THP works. That means you have quite the breadth of experience. Can you please share for all of us on the call some of the really core elements of the epicenter strategy work? Even for those of us who know it really well, we do always benefit from hearing it straight from the mouth of the experts.
Thank you very much, Tori. It's been so generous of you to describe me and give my bio. I think you've been so much generous. It's a pleasure to meet as a family. We are not in normal times, because of this COVID menace. Things are not normal, but even under these circumstances, we have found the need to connect. This tells about the real family that THP is found to be doing. Now, as you rightly said, THP Ghana happens to have the largest, implementation of the epicenter strategy in Africa. We have 45 epicenters spanning across about 500 rural communities and covering not less than 350 1,000 people. We go about to mobilize women, men, youth, and children to undertake development programs by themselves. See, more importantly, these are people who have extreme potentials. And so we try to mobilize them in a form of a cluster. So when we talk about epicenter, we are talking about clusters of rural communities, between 5 and 15 communities deciding to come together to undertake their own development activities. And these are led by women in most of the sectors that we work in. And it is so amazing when you see these women really show, that their expertise in how to run all the programs that we have. And I believe that they are doing very wonderfully to try to end hunger from among them and also other places that are not even under our working areas. So that is what the Hunger Project Ghana is doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Spoken from many years of experience. And since you mentioned the focus on leadership, I am going to give you a pop quiz question, actually. I know that your mother is an important part of your life. And because we are connected outside of work, I know that you recently got to celebrate her on Mother's Day. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your family's experience joining her for the Mother's Day celebration. I know you had a fun video, of her with her many generations.
Thank you so much. My mother is a centenarian. In fact, she is 104 years old. She's quite aged, but she's surprisingly very, very strong, extremely strong, and so industrious as well. And so during the Mother's Day, I thought together with my wife that no, we must visit this old lady. We didn't even call her to inform her we were coming. We just pumped into her right there in the house. And when we went, she was there working on maize, trying to remove maize seed from the cobs. And so she saw us and she was so much happy. She was so happy. And we quickly joined the work that she was doing and started conversation with them. And all the family gathered around us. We are a very happy family. I am married. I have 4 children. I lost my wife some 12 years ago. And since then, I myself also acted as a mother and a father. And so I cherish real motherhood. And that was why we gave that surprise visit to the old lady to share with her, the joy of what she has given to us. So that is roughly what happened during the Mother's Day. It was so exciting.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I think the intergenerational inspiration that she clearly has placed in your life and the lives of her grandchildren, the many people around her, was so evident. And I just knew she would be a great example of the work we're talking about. So thank you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay.
Thank you. So moving forward, one of the other sayings I have come to love sayings working with some of my colleagues here who really love to use them and are often the perfect way of phrasing a thought. Another one that came to mind is necessity is the mother of invention. It's probably quite telling to many of us that they mention the mother. But really it speaks to the fact that under some conditions of distress, duress, lack of resources is really when innovation and invention flourishes. So Samuel, I would love to hear from you about the Hunger Project communities community partners, and especially the women's more creative responses and innovative solutions to these conditions of necessity living under the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Tori. As you rightly said, the whole COVID-19 hit the nation in a very big bang like that on the 12th of March. And so there were so much, people there was so much anxiety among people. And in no time, in fact, within the next week or two, all sanitizers got finished in the nation. And it was difficult to even get access to a sanitizer. And then the nose mask, it was extremely difficult. No pharmaceutical establishment had them. And we just couldn't get them anywhere. So it was then that the government decided to try to encourage some producers to produce some of these things. So you can imagine the prices, how these things cost within the market system. And so as THP, we quickly responded to the need. And so all our, most of our epicenters in the rural areas, looking at it from their very experiences, the things that they have been doing, we tried to encourage them so that they themselves will try to innovate and bring out some production by themselves to try to meet the scarcity that we were experiencing in the market. And so the EPOs were made, when they went to the field, they encouraged the people, giving them awareness education. They, alongside, encouraged them to try to go into innovation, producing some of these necessary things that are needed to fight this COVID. And so we already have vocational establishment in our epicenters. That is adolescent girls who are now being trained to learn how to sew. So they are learning seamstressing. So we encourage them to use that as an opportunity to go into the production of nose masks. Meanwhile, the Ghana Health Service had also educated a lot of people on how to produce simple but useful nose mask. What are the things that are needed? How should they do it to be able to withstand or to be able to serve the purpose for which they are needed? So all our vocational training establishments in the epicenters are now sewing nose masks by themselves, giving it out to the community, not for free, but they sell it out. And then even extending it to areas that are outside the epicenters. And that is not the only thing. We also taught them how to prepare liquid soap. And so the epicenters are also preparing liquid soaps for sale and for use in their epicenter catchment areas. Then came the most needed thing, hand washing, which is also one of the key protocols that are needed to fight this pandemic. And so we resorted to the use of tippy taps. And these tippy taps, we mobilize these community members to try to produce these tippy taps by themselves. And so where they got together and mobilized some of the local resources, laying hands on any gallon that can be used. And then they were using sticks that were available in their own vicinities and some ropes. They created tippy taps and used that as a hand washing facility without touching the vessel. And also using the leg to press it down, water would flow and then they could wash their hands very, very safely. So all our epicenters are responding to the needs of this COVID pandemic by trying to produce things that are needed most in their own vicinities using their local materials. And I think this has served a very good purpose because one, the huge costs that they would have incurred are no longer there. They only buy a few things and they are able to satisfy themselves. So our people are innovative and they respond adequately to the needs of everything that comes their way. That is what they are doing in these times that are also not normal for us.
That's amazing. I encourage anyone to Google Tippy Tap, which Samuel mentioned, which is sort of a contactless hand washing station, a sort of feat of engineering that is, and also on our Facebook page, thank you, to catch a glimpse of how community members are reducing transmission through that technology. Samuel, thank you so much. I mean, I think for no matter where you're living, obviously each decision every day of how to invest your time and energy is very affected by resources. And when you're living in conditions of hunger and poverty or not, we're still making decisions every day about how to allocate our time and energy. And knowing that many members of our community, our epicenter communities across Ghana, are already juggling a lot of resource constraints, hearing about taking up a new initiative to learn sewing, to create nose masks, to develop hand sanitizer and liquid soap, is just, it's incredible. It's almost overwhelming, but it's really incredible and hugely inspirational. To me, I should go get my sewing machine out of storage. So thank you for thank you for sharing all the work that they're doing. So a little bit more on these questions of access to healthcare, which we know is such a critical aspect to all of our lives, another true universal every day, but most especially when we're living under a global pandemic. We know that also in Ghana, there are stay-at-home orders, as there are in the US and many other countries, that have caused public transportation slowdowns, a bit less mobility, including for healthcare workers to reach their posting stations, especially in rural areas. Given those conditions, I would love for you to share how the Hunger Project has played a role in ensuring continuity of care and ongoing access to healthcare services under those conditions.
Yeah, thank you very much. Really, it was a big challenge, especially nationally, how the health workers could even travel to their workplaces. In Accra, for instance, during the lockdown, it was a huge problem for these frontline workers to be able to travel to their workplaces, and sometimes they had to meet with security officers, and if they were not able to show some form of identification that allowed them to pass through, some of them were unnecessarily handled in a way that they didn't like. And so now, even in the capital towns, the government has designated some buses to convey only health officials to reach their various institutions of work. Then coming down to the Hunger Project, you know, it is really very important because in the first place, rural areas, it is difficult for rural areas to attract health workers because of you know, living conditions. It is better in towns than the rural areas. And so in these abnormal times like we find ourselves in, it's always good to ensure that these people are readily there and available to serve the people. And so with the Hunger Project, luckily with us, all our epicenters have nurses' quarters. And so all the health workers within the clinics in our epicenters are housed right at the vicinity of the epicenters. And so they are rightly there and available 24/7 to serve the people. Not all of them travel out together, if there will be any traveling out at all, they arrange such that one person travels to transact some business outside, and then the others are there to also serve. So in terms of availability, they are there. Then there is the other question of they moving to the other communities, because this very situation also prevents many people to travel around. And so there is the need for these health workers to also move to the communities and then try to add on to the education that hunger project staff are giving, and also support them in some of the ailments and sicknesses that they find with the people. And so with that, what we do is that they are now using motorbikes, and then as a way of providing transportation in our epicenters. Nowadays, what we do is to provide tricycle for the epicenters, as a social enterprise. And this tricycle became readily usable for them to travel to these other communities to work in there. So yes, we are doing everything to ensure that the staff in our clinics get easy access to travel around to the communities. And then I must also say that THP has also supported in providing personal protective equipment to all our clinics, some of them. And this also has encouraged the health staff to be able to move out without thinking that they are unnecessarily endangering their lives, because they feel at least a little more secured in terms of protection. So they feel happier moving about, doing the work at the clinics, and also going out. So these are some of the little things that have been put in place to try to make sure the people at the epicenters get maximum access to healthcare in our clinics.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's really great. I think many of us have seen how critical just access to PPE is for healthcare workers and frontline workers generally. So knowing that the epicenter communities and the Hunger Project are part of that, I think speaks to that basic continuity of care. So thank you so much for sharing that. For the time we have left, I'm going to bump it back to Sarah to guide us through the next portion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samuel. Thank you for all that sharing. And thank you, Tori, for the fantastic questions. This has been a really great conversation. We'll open it up to some sharing for folks in just a moment, but I wanted to make sure that we asked the questions that had come through on the chat. Thank you for the really thoughtful questions. Samuel, this is for you. You spoke a lot about what we're doing right now in this moment, in this time of crisis. And I'm wondering if you could project forward a little bit to what do Hunger Project communities look like in the future post-COVID? What can the Hunger Project do to empower them, empower people with the resources and the information that they need? Has any planning or thought gone into sort of that future vision?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, a lot of planning is now going on. And in fact, even this COVID situation has even brought out certain things that are happening. And those things we are pretty sure those things are going to be carried on even after COVID. And that is the way we share information. Hitherto, using community centers were used mostly for announcement. We have community communication centers, which has posted loudspeakers in those rural communities, and then from a central point, you can speak to most of these communities. So these are now a system that is intensively used for education and even for training, because people are told that these are the things that is going to be done, and then they wait for that period to be able to listen into the information that is going on. And then the government of Ghana, through the Ministry of Education, is also improving the digital information sharing system through the use of mobile phones. And with the THP's COVID planning, the plans that we have, we intend to provide phones for most of the animators and the leaders, so that we establish that information system right on the phones. So we believe that after the COVID, this is one of the areas that we're still going to continue. In other words, not mostly what we used to do of old, that is face-to-face trainings and sharing of information, but this time around we're going to do more on digital and other means of information sharing. They are very useful, because I remember one of these instances when they were doing these things on community information systems. There were some people in their farms. When they heard it from the farm, they ran quickly to the town to try to ask questions on the information that we're given through this information system. So it means that it is something that the people are developing interest in. So that is one thing that we intend to establish, and it's also a very important thing. And then secondly, there are also how to prepare towards such menace if it should come, because hitherto this very disease caught us unprepared. There wasn't anything there. And so there is always the need. It is being talked about nationally, and we as THP2 is one thing that we're going to take up, that we prepare ourselves against these things, so that when they happen, they don't take us unawares. But at least we would have been prepared a little to be able to face these things and then work against it more efficiently. So this is what we intend doing after the COVID menace. When it goes, systems that are put in place are still going to work within our setup, both as preventive and preparatory to meet such subsequent things if it should ever happen. And then we are going more digital than physical face-to-face meetings and education. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Samuel. You also answered a couple of other questions in your answer, so that was perfect. I also want to synthesize another couple of questions that we've gotten, which is, how is this impacting food insecurity? And what is THP Ghana doing to prepare at the epicenter level?
In terms of food, you talked about food security. We know certainly that because of this COVID menace, prices of foodstuffs have gone extremely high. And in fact, Ghana's inflationary rate, which was a single digit, has now become double digit because of just two main articles. And that is plantain as a major foodstuff that is taken in Ghana. The price has so shot up that it has changed, the inflationary rate that we used to be in for this month of April. It means that food is key. And in such circumstances, it is also one thing that we should take care of. And in fact, when there was a lockdown, the main area of agitation was with food, because there were a lot of people who live from hand to mouth. In other words, they live on daily wage. What they earn daily, that is what they use to feed. And so when they are deprived of their daily wage, they go hungry. Now, coming to the hunger project, yes, we have this menace tormenting everybody, but we still see the need to allow some of the systems that operate in the epicenters to be protected in order to produce the services that people need. One major thing is the microfinance. Our microfinance is still operating because this is the farming season, and this is the time that people come for loans to try to work on their farms. And so we have devised a means of protecting the workers in the microfinance, and also provide enough funds there for the people to access it and use it for their farming. So even though we have this menace, in order to stem a potential famine or shortage of food, what we are doing is to encourage them and making sure that all things having to do with farming, we place much premium or attention to it, so that we don't use this menace as an excuse, not an excuse to reduce farming or to not to produce more food to feed the people. So the epicenter people who are predominantly farmers are still continuing in their farming activities. They go to farm and they are in their nose masks. They go to farm and they have water and those other facilities to do the hand washing and do so many protective things that they are doing. So in our epicenters, yes, people are producing, and then whatever has also been produced, the epicenters are also storing what they have. Hitherto, they could have sold all the stock that they had, especially maize. Now that they are starting farming, they would have sold out everything that they had. But now they are selling out some portions and then keeping some other portions for themselves, because charity begins at home. They need to feed themselves to be able to feed others. And so they are not selling out everything, but keeping enough to feed themselves. So storage, local storage is being enhanced to serve the people, and then production for more produce is also going on to increase production. So these two measures are being done to stem potential farming coming from this menace. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samuel. Thank you for answering those questions, and thank you everyone who sent in questions. I wanted to now open up for sharing if you'd like. If you have follow-up questions more in depth about Ghana in particular, I encourage you to either send your questions here or follow up with a fundraiser contact, or you can even email me directly if you'd like. I'll put my email in the chat right now. But right now, I'd just like to hear from some of our Hunger Project family, just some open sharing if anyone would like to go.
This is Richard Little. This is the first time I've had the opportunity to join a conversation like this. And I have to say, it's very impressive what, excuse me, what you guys have done in your communities. The self-sufficiency and creativity and, you know, to me, the right-minded thinking of how to attack the problem is really excellent. So thank you for the opportunity to listen and hear some of what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you too. It's a pleasure hearing from you.
Well, you're doing incredible work. That's
thank you.
You know, you know, in the developed countries, you know, I live in Los Angeles, California, and you know, we have it very good here. And so each of us has an image of what various places in the world might be dealing with. I have fortunately been to 53 countries, and so I have a bit of an idea, more of an idea than many people who don't get to travel.
Okay.
The self-sufficiency, the creativity that you and the people in your community are demonstrating is a great tribute to you and the work that you're doing, and to end poverty for the work that they're doing to facilitate. So that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rich. I want to open it up to Nancy Scott.
Yes, I am so happy to be on this call. I feel like the COVID has allowed me to reconnect with the Hunger Project. I worked for the Hunger Project in San Francisco from 1983 to 1986. And, you know, it's in my life from time to time, but not very steadily. And just to hear you speak, Samuel, it was just so unbelievably inspiring. And believe it or not, I live in an affordable, kind of a low income, affordable senior housing. And all the people here complain all the time that they're not being taken care of during COVID. And just hearing you speak and what Richard pointed to, the self-sufficiency and coming up the necessity being the mother invention, it is so inspiring to hear this. And I just so appreciate you making available these webinars, Sarah and Tori. It's just a joy to hear these speakers from Africa and have the Hunger Project work become present to me again, because at the time I worked for the Hunger Project, we were only in the United States. We hadn't gone over to India or Africa at that time. And not as much as now anyway. We were starting, but now it's so full blown. So thank you. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being here, Nancy. Would anyone else like to share?
This is Larry. I don't know if you can hear me, Suzanne.
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I just want to congratulate Samuel and the team in Ghana, the team that I was privileged to meet. Monica and I met back in February, and it's most impressive, the work you're doing, and it seems to me like the role, the importance, and the contribution of the epicenter concept is really being fully evidenced during this crisis. So again, my hearty congratulations. Samuel, I hope we'll be in touch soon. Thank you for
Yes,
this
definitely.
phone conversation.
Thank you too. We will connect very soon.
Thank you. And Nancy Gordon, did you want to say something?
Yes, I also appreciate you, Sarah, and Tori and the Hunger Project for putting this together, and we could connect with Samuel from Ghana. I missed a trip to South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe in April. It was canceled by the Commonwealth Club just before we were going to leave. I live across the bay from the other Nancy. Anyway, I've been very moved by the Hunger Project's work since '79, and was moved to get a grand piano and start playing again. But the East Bay Hunger Project at that time, we raised $5,000 and did it a year and a half later. So it's dear to my heart. I've been a part of it for many years and totally admire the example that the Hunger Project has given to many other organizations. I remember I forget how much they paid for an ad in the New York Times that listed all the direct aid programs. I don't know if any of you remember, Nancy I'm sure does. And it moves me, and mentioning the word connection really resonates, I think, everywhere we go. And I went off the video for a few minutes because I had to blow my nose and cry a little bit with being moved by your presentation and knowing the heart that you all put into this is inspiring, moving, and I totally trust that there's a lot of good coming out of this pandemic, and may we see many changes locally, nationally, globally with our brothers and sisters everywhere and in our government systems. I look for positive changes to serve more people in a way that's meaningful and lasting and empowering. So thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. I appreciate you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much, Nancy. So I think we can go ahead and close out. I wanted to kick it back over to Tori to say our goodbyes.
Great. As a current member of the Hunger Project staff, it means a lot to hear from people who have been part of the journey along the way. And I know we might all be familiar with another saying from Sir Isaac Newton, but if I've seen farther, it's by standing on the shoulders of the giants who came before. So I really appreciate the foundation that was laid by everyone who was part of this work before I joined, who's part of it today. So thank you all so much for being part of this discussion and really the whole Hunger Project journey. Just to maybe consolidate a little bit of what was shared in the webinar and also in some of these final comments, it goes a little bit against common sense, but the first cycle of humanitarianism is actually a preparedness cycle. So it's taking place before the disaster strikes, before the famine or before the conflict, before the flood. And I think so much of what we heard about from Samuel today speaks to that preparedness and the differences in community resilience and eventually survival based on how prepared a community is. So I just kept hearing that message over and over again in the systems and processes and resources that he was describing. And it brought to mind that actually is the first step of recovering from a humanitarian disaster. So hearing about that preparedness was really powerful. Thank you to everyone again. It was a joy to be with you all. And for those of you who have time and interest, we would love to have you at our next webinar as well. It will be at the end of May near World Hunger Day on May 28th. We will have some women from the Hunger Project staff for a session called Empowered Women, Empowering Women. So if that's a theme that you'd like to join us for, we would love to have you, and details will be coming on email. Any follow-up questions, feel free to reply to the initial email. Or if you have a direct fundraiser contact that you work with, we would love to hear feedback, follow-up questions, and keep this engagement going. Thank you so, so much. Thank you to Samuel, star of the show, who gave us all of the insights from the ground.
Thank you so much.
Tori. Thank you,
Thank you,
Samuel.
Tori.
Speaking to you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Everyone.
Hi,
Bye.
everyone.